Well, I'm out here in Toronto, which I can assure you will be a city that not a single Conservative MP wins. That's not hard to say. It happens so rarely, certainly south of the famous 401 highway. That's all Liberal red. The only diversity, maybe the odd New Democrat who sneaks in. But what about Alberta? One of the safest places I see that the Conservatives are under 40%. And the Liberals are just, 5% behind. Now, I take this with a grain of salt because Abacus data, their chairman is a Liberal activist, Bruce Anderson, but I think this is in accord with other polls. Is Alberta, is Saskatchewan, is the West, are they enamored with Trudeau or just disappointed in Erin O'Toole? Joining us now from Edmonton, gateway to the North, City of Champions, is our friend Lorne Gunter, senior columnist with the Edmonton Sun. Lorne, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, you're welcome.
You know what? I have an animosity, not a personal animosity, but I'm a deep critic of Erin O'Toole, so I'm going to rely on you to be more fair. Not that I'm unfair. I'm just mad at the guy. I think he's blown it. I think he just was he put all his eggs in the carbon tax basket. I mean, the fact that he doesn't talk to Rebel News doesn't bug me that much. No Conservative MP does for some reason. I just think that he's not that conservative and he's blowing it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. So don't expect me to try and be fairer than you about Erin O'Toole. I mean, in the last 2 months, I've called him a dud in print. Then he came out with this carbon tax plan. I called him a dishonest dud. And I just think he's bumbling. You know what? I think the biggest single problem he has is you look at popular, successful Conservative politicians. In Canada, you look at Ralph Klein, you look at Mike Harris in Ontario. In the rest of the world, you look at Ronald Reagan, you look at Margaret Thatcher. Those were people who took conservative positions, even Stephen Harper, conservative positions, and made them palatable to centrist voters. Yeah. I think what Erin O'Toole is doing is trying to take liberal views and make them palatable to conservative voters, and that's simply not what works. I think the Abacus data is way off in the West on the Liberals. I do not sense any support for the Liberals beyond the usual suspects, a few downtown lawyers in the big cities, people who are looking to be appointed to the bench at some point, and the activists who always like the Liberals. You get beyond that group, there is no sense that I get of any support for the Liberals. I think what's happening federally is what has happened provincially in Alberta, and that is that the UCP government under Jason Kenney is not very popular. Its support is under 30%. But the big beneficiary is not the Liberals. It's not the New Democrats. The New Democrats are exactly the same support level that they've been at since they were defeated in the 2019 election. The big beneficiaries have been the undecided. Yeah. Undecided provincially in Alberta are almost up to 30%. And that's because you have a lot of right of center people who don't think that the UCP is serving them. And I think you've got the same dynamic going on federally. You've got an awful lot of right of center voters in Alberta and to some extent in Saskatchewan who don't like Erin O'Toole. They think he's weak. They don't think that he's conservative enough. They don't think he's conservative at all. And that is my sense of what's happening.
Yeah. There's one thing I'll mention about this Abacus poll, and I don't want to talk too much about the methodology or anything, because frankly, other polls have said similar things. It doesn't measure Maxime Bernier's People's Party. Now, I know what they would say. They would say, well, that, he doesn't have a likelihood of succeeding and he doesn't have a seat. Well, okay, but they measured the Green Party, and they've only got a couple. I sense that alienation, that none of the aboveness that you talked about provincially, I sense that federally. And there's the Maverick Party. I think if they had tested People's Party and Maxime Bernier and Maverick, I think they would have seen different numbers, at least in Alberta. It's that once a generation Alberta mood of, the system's failed us, maybe let's start a new party. Like this has happened in Alberta. For those who know the history, Preston Manning and the Reform Party, way back in the day, the Social Credit Party. I mean, Alberta comes up with new parties in a way that really no other place in Canada does. I mean,
even before that, the CCF.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you go back as far as the 30s, an awful lot of the impetus for starting the CCF, the precursor to the NDP, came out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. So we're not afraid of starting new parties. And maybe, I don't get any sense that Maxime Bernier has any traction at all in Alberta. None. People's Party doesn't register in any of the conversations I have. Nobody I talk to says the Maverick Party does. Maverick Party with Jay Hill, who is a former Conservative MP under Stephen Harper, does have some traction. What it doesn't have yet are recognizable candidates. And I think that that's the thing that stands between it and maybe being competitive in 4 or 5 places. My biggest concern for them is that we will see Liberals elected because the federal Conservatives under O'Toole are so weak. Yeah. And the Maverick Party might come up just enough to split some votes and let Liberals walk down the middle in a few urban ridings. But there are really only 4 ridings out of 34 in Alberta where the Liberals could possibly win, 2 in Calgary, 2 in Edmonton. And even at that, like, you know, Edmonton's very lefty mayor, Don Iveson, was sniffing around at maybe trying to get the nomination for Edmonton Centre. But the MP from the Liberal MP from that riding who lost in 2019 announced he was running for the nomination this week. And I think that is a sign that Iveson is not running because the party would have cleared the decks to let Iveson win uncontested.
Right.
So I don't think Iveson is going to win. Yeah. And I just don't think that Justin Trudeau can muster enough support in any location in Alberta, even in downtown Calgary and downtown Edmonton. I don't think they can muster enough support to win a seat.
Yeah. Well, I find it very frustrating, and I don't think Justin Trudeau cares about getting, I mean, he'd like a seat in Alberta, but he doesn't care. He's going to pick up 20 seats in Ontario. He's going to wipe clean the Atlantic. He doesn't care. I mean, and by the way, he doesn't need a majority. The NDP and the Bloc give him a working majority anytime he needs one.
Do you mean he's going to pick up an extra 20 seats in Ontario? Is that what you meant by that? Because he's going to get way over 20.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry, Trudeau. Yeah, he's going to, I mean, I think the Conservatives are going to lose seats in Ontario, perhaps up to 20.
I think so, too. I think the Liberals are headed for 80 seats in Ontario. Yeah. I think they're headed for 25 to 30 in Quebec, and they'll get 34 out of Atlantic Canada. And it matters not what happens from Manitoba West. They don't care.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.